Hey everyone, chapter 5. We're going to start off here with ratios and ratio tables. Okay, so before we go any further, if you are not prepared to watch this entire thing, take notes and focus, I suggest you just go ahead and wait and do this another time. This section is challenging, and if you're not paying attention, pausing, rewinding to listen again, we're probably going to have a ton of questions. I feel like this section might be one of the more challenging if you don't pay attention. If you do pay attention, I think you'll be good. I also want to say that this section is very hard to understand by looking at the book. Not one of their best performances. But anyway, so let's talk about this. So we're talking about ratios. Ratios are, things like, 3 to 4. We did this last year. This year we're really going to go into the harder parts of ratios and understanding some things like the value of the ratio, how a ratio of one thing to another compares to the total. So if we were saying 3 to 4, blue to yellow, then the total would be the total of blue. So, I'm sorry. You always want to start by writing what you're talking about. So, blue to yellow. And remember that would be blue to yellow is 3 to 4, right? So, that's how they work. You're going to be using basically fractions a lot here. So, what is blue to the total amount? I used it. This is a terrible example, but we're going to go with it. So for blue, it would be 3, and the total is 3 plus 4, right? This plus this for total. Okay, we're going to be thinking about that a little too. The other thing we're going to be thinking about is, as they kind of talk about here, A to B is the number A over B, which is the same as A divided by B. So 3 divided by 4 is equal to 3/4 or 0.75. So the relationship from blue to yellow is that blue is 3/4 of yellow. So for every 1 cup of blue, 1 cup of yellow, we use 3/4 of a cup of yellow. So if you divide these two, you will get 0.75, and that would be per 1. All right, so this is kind of like the unit rate, and we're going to talk more about rates in the next section, which is also a bit of a challenging section. But I know, so this one's going to be a little bit long-winded, guys. I really want you to understand this. If you have to break this video up into sections, that's okay. I just really need you to understand kind of how these relate. So let's go over it again. So let's look at this one. So we have snails to fish is equal to 2 to 6. Okay, now simplified, that would be what? 1 to 3. So we could actually simplify that. So for every bushel or barrel or whatever you want to say of fish, for every one, let's say just 1 bucket. So for every 1 bucket, if I divide 1 divided by 3, okay, then that gives me 1/3. When they're fractions, it's easy. That gives me 1/3. Or another way to look at it is if we flipped these, then it would be 3 to 1. So there are 3 times as many fish as there are snails. Or there's 1/3 as many snails as there are fish. Or for every 1 cup or bucket, as we're calling them buckets, for every 1 bucket of fish, you get, for every 1 bucket of snails, because I flipped this for this example, for every 1 bucket of snails, we have 3 buckets of fish when I flipped it. Notice I flipped here, okay? Probably shouldn't have, but anyway. All right, so we're going to talk more about that. But that is just what the basics of what I need you guys to understand. Also, the total snails, so we had 2 to 6, and that was snails to fish. The snails to total is equal to 2 to 6 plus 2, right? This plus this, or 2 to 8, or 1 to 4. Okay, so that'll all come into play. Finally, moving on here. Okay, so you make flubber using the ingredients shown. Flubber is this green stuff. Write the ratio of cold water to glue. So the recipe we're looking at over here uses 3/2 cup of water per 2 cups of glue. Okay, and it asks us what's the ratio of water to glue. So if it asks us for the water of hot water to borax, we'd be looking at 4/3 to 3, but instead we're looking at 3/2 cold water to glue 2, so 3/2 to 2. Notice 3/2 to 2 is written as this complex fraction thing here, just 3/2 divided by 2. 3/2 times 1/2, keep, change, flip, is 3/4. So the multiplicative relationship, which is the fancy way of saying that there is 3/4 the amount of cold water as there is per, so in other words, 3/4 over 1, okay? So 3/4 would be the cold water, and 1 per 1, and I know I'm getting into unit rates here, but that's okay. That's what a multiplicative relationship is, per cup of glue. Okay, so if I have if I take one, it doesn't even matter, just 1 bucket of glue. Let's say I want to make a huge amount of this stuff. And I take one, just any size bucket, doesn't matter, the whole full bucket of glue. Then I would fill with water, cold water, 3/4 of that bucket to keep the ratio the same. That's how these things work. And it's all, even though this chapter, that's why I don't really like the way they explain it, it is a multiplicative relationship. Okay, so that just means like you're multiplying. When we get to these ratio tables, it's a multiplicative relationship, and I don't like it being taught any other way. I'm very big on, if there's a correct way that always works, don't think of it in other weird ways. So anyway, that's the multiplicative relationship. Now we're going to have to complete ratio tables, which we did last year, but these have fractions. It doesn't change anything, though. So it's the same way. So hopefully you remember. So I asked myself, 3 times what equals 12 times 4? So 3/4 times 4 is 3, and you're going to want to build some space on your paper to do a lot of multiplying over here. So that would be 3/1 or 3. Okay, 3 times what is 15? Well, 15 divided by 3 is 5, so times 5. I'm going to change the color, apparently. Times 5. Let's change this arrow. Okay, so times 5. So therefore, 3/4 times 5 equals 15/4. And I can't simplify that, so I am good with 15/4. Okay? All right, so now, here's the tricky one. Okay, so 3/4 times what is 5/4? Well, hopefully you guys remember, I just talked about this like crazy last year. 3/4 times something equals 5/4. The way I find that is multiplication and division are opposites. So I take this 5/4 and I divide this. So 3/4 times something equals 5/4. The way to find that something is by dividing. 5/4 divided by 3/4. Keep, change, flip, and we have 5/3. So what did I just answer? I answered this is times 5/3. Okay, so that's a part that some kids get a little confused on, 5/3. So that means up here I multiply 3 times 5/3. 3 over 1 times 5 over 3, excuse my terrible writing here, I'm kind of sideways, is 5 over 1, so this becomes 5. Okay, you may need to rewind that and look again. It's literally, it's this times what is 3 times what is 12? Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4, and I do the same down here. So I multiply this times 4, multiply this times 4, multiply this, this times 5, so I multiply this times 5, and it always goes like this. Find the one you have, figure out what you multiplied by, use that to multiply the same top one. And stick with the first complete, so you want to stick with the completed ratio to do this from. All right. Lastly, we're going to talk about this paint problem. Okay, so note this is what we were talking about with the yellow, blue, and then total. Total is just this plus this, okay? So they're saying you mix a half cup of yellow for every 3/4 cup of blue, to make 15 cups of green. So blue plus yellow is green. So if that got confusing, this is green, except I just wrote green and blue, that makes it even weirder. So again, the total, we talked about this in the first slide, total is this plus this, okay? So now the question asks us, how much yellow did we use? Okay, so it just wants to know here, it wants to know this right here. So honestly, this line right here is unnecessary because we can ask ourselves, well, how did we get from here to here? So 5/4 times what equals 15? And hopefully you're thinking to yourself, oh, divide. 15 over 1 divided by 5/4 is the same as times 4/5. Keep flipping ahead here. So that would be a 1 and a 3 and a 12 over 1. So this would be times 12. So now all I have to do is take 1/2 times 12. So 1/2 times 12 over 1 is 6. So the answer is 6. All right. So down here they show another method, which is to use the multiplicative relationship. This absolutely works. So 2/5 of, so you figure out that yellow is 2/5 compared to of the green. So if you, or of the total, because I divided these. No, 2/5. So yeah, yellow is 2/5 of the relationship. So 2/5 times 15 would be 6. So the problem with this is you have to rethink the whole thing when you go to blue. So blue's relationship would be different. Okay, I'm not going to get too much into it, other than just to say that blue is 3/4. So if I wanted to set this up, it'd be 3/4 to 5/4, which is the same as 3/4 divided by 5/4 or times 4/5. So blue to total has a different multiplicative relationship. So it'd be 3/5 times the 15. So if we do that, 3/5 times 15 is equal to 9 over 1. So this would be 9 using that method. Notice again, that part probably got a little confusing. I took the 3/4 over the 5/4 right here. And then divided it, and then took the 3/5, just like they did here. I take the 3/5 times the 15. The other way to look at it is if 2/5 of the total solution is yellow, 3/5, the other remaining, 3/5 would be for the blue. Okay, I know this is confusing. I would recommend watching this more than once. If you guys are having trouble with a couple problems, I may do a whole video on just specific problems. So thanks for hanging in there if you did. Again, please watch again if you need to. I did the best I could to explain a pretty complex idea. So come ask me questions. Talk to you guys later.